record. Okay. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Thank you very much for joining. And tonight, what we're going to do, inshallah, we're going to discuss two verses from Surat al-Anbiyaa. And this is actually a short story that tells us a little bit about prophets Dawud and Sulaiman. All right, Prophet Dawud, David, and Prophet Sulaiman, Solomon, right? And it is specifically related to a, you could say, a lawsuit. So hopefully Brother Saad can help me here. But it is actually related to that because both Prophet Dawud and Prophet Sulaiman were judges. I mean, initially it was Prophet Dawud, who we know Dawud was the father of Sulaiman. All right, so we're going to start with, like I said, Surah al-Anbiyaa. It's always good to have a copy of the Quran with you. You hold it as a reference. You could use it as a reference, whether you listen to the halaqah live or maybe later in a recording. It always helps you establish this relationship, this connection with the Quran, right? And it really helps when you have a copy of the Quran in front of you, like I have here, and you are looking at the actual verse, at the actual ayah, and you kind of now communicate with the words, with the letters, with how it looks, right? So you have that kind of relationship. I always put emphasis on various aspects of the Quran. So for example, it's not enough just to read the commentary. Commentary is good, but you also want to learn some vocabulary. So if every time we had a halaqah, for example, or you read it on your own, and you learned just one word, you can learn the Arabic and the English, right? That is great. Now you have added one word into your vocabulary, right? So that is always beneficial to us. So again, I'll give you time if you want to go fetch your copy of the Quran, but it is, or if you have an app on the phone, you should have a Quran app or Quranic app on the phone. So that is Surah number 21. And the verses we're going to cover are 78 and 79. So only two verses. All right, and as usual, I'll read it in Arabic. Again, even if you don't understand it, that's not the point. The point is you get used to hearing the sounds. So now you're familiar with the sounds and all of that, right? So it says in Arabic, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وداود وسليمان. So you see the beginning of the ayah, the beginning of the verse, it mentions the two prophets. So before we learn about the story, before we learn about the details, it starts with the two names. And these are the two names we should keep in mind. So as we go through the story and as the story progresses, those are the two names we're going to keep in mind now. And keep in mind, this is a story of a father and a son. So Dawud, we know Dawud is the father of Sulaiman. So this story is going to give us many angles. One of them is the angle of a father and a son and how they deal with each other. And that's really helpful to us because a lot of people ask, well, how is the relationship supposed to be between a father and a son? Should it be too formal? Should it be totally informal? Should it be somewhere in between? Can you tell jokes? I don't know. I mean, a lot of questions about that. So what we're going to find today is something very, maybe in a way, could be shocking to some of us. How Dawud and Sulaiman dealt with each other. So keep your eye for that. Keep your ears as well. How Dawud and Sulaiman were interacting in a matter that is really important. Right? I mean, this is a matter of judgment. You're judging between people. It is not an insignificant matter. It is not something that you take lightly. It's really serious because people's lives, livelihoods are involved here in any matter of judgment, right? So this is a serious matter. So now we're talking about a relationship between a son and a father and a serious matter. How do they deal with that? How do they deal with each other? Okay? So it says, وَدَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ إِذْ يَحْكُمَانِ فِي الْحَرْثِ. Now, immediately what you see here, you see that both are judging. So imagine obviously if the father is present, the son should not have a role. Like, that's how we think, that the son should not have a role in judgment, right? Because if the father speaks, then the son should be silent. Now, this is the kind of culture we were brought in, right? And not even forget about matters of judgment, even informal matters, any kind of gatherings, any kind of sitting. If the adults speak, the kids should remain silent. And what happens when we do that as a culture, kids will remain kids. They will never grow up because they were never given the opportunity to speak up. So for example, if you're told over and over again that you are a child, you are a kid, and you keep that position. So this is like a title for you. This is like a position you occupy. So know your place, know your status, know your position. You're a kid and you shall remain as such. Do you think that kid will grow? Do you think there's any room for growth for a person like that? So this is the kind of question we should ask. Now, again, listen carefully. Every word in this ayah is going to matter. Again, it starts by mentioning the two names, Dawud and Sulaiman. Of course, we mentioned Dawud before Sulaiman because we have to respect the father. So no one is talking about taking the respect away from the father. Not at all. The father earns all the respect. The father gets all the respect. I thought I muted everybody, but please, let's keep it quiet for now. All right. So, but let's watch the progress in the story. So it says, وَدَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ إِذْ يَحْكُمَانَ. All right, and you already noticed the rhyme here, the rhyming. دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ إِذْ يَحْكُمَانَ. And I don't care if you know Arabic or not. This should be music to your ears. دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ إِذْ يَحْكُمَانَ. All right? But the more beautiful part is not the musical sound, but the meaning. Because it put Dawud and Sulaiman in the same verb. We know in Arabic we have like three tenses, if you will. One for the singular, one for the plural, and one for two. Like if you have two people, they have a special, grammatical structure in Arabic. And that is this one, yahkuman. It means two people are judging. So already it gave both Dawud and Sulaiman the authority to judge. All right. Now, guess how old Sulaiman was? Some scholars say that Sulaiman was only 11 years old. 11 years old, imagine. I'm sure most of you are older than that. But the question is, let's look now at what Sulaiman does and see how many people that age or even much older can do what Sulaiman did. And that's really the question here. So the question is not just, do we allow kids of that age to do something serious like that or to judge like that? The more serious question is, even if we gave you that opportunity, would you be able to do that? Are you equipped? Are you mature enough to do that? And that's an important question. Okay, so let us continue. So it says, وَدَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ إِذْ يَحْكُمَانَ فِي الْحَرْثِ. What is al-harth? Well, al-harth is, the literal meaning of harth is from hiratha, which means plowing the earth, like turning the earth. This is a very important part of agriculture. If you're a farmer, or you know about farming, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So in order for the earth to give and to produce, you need to turn the earth. And I'm not a farmer, but I think you might do it every year or every other year, but the earth needs that so it's able to keep producing. And there are many benefits of plowing. You're turning the earth, right? So now you're allowing, for example, if the earth or the soil was hard, now you've softened the earth. So now water can penetrate and can, go inside, right? Also, the soil that was inside now it's facing up, so it could receive, the air, and the sun and all of that. So it's like a cycle within that, whatever 1, 2, 3 inches of earth or more maybe. It's very, very healthy for the earth and for the soil, and that's why all farmers do it. Now, sometimes the act of farming itself and agriculture is referred to as harth, because plowing is so important as part of farming. That's why we refer to the whole process as plowing, or we refer to the whole process as harth in Arabic. So here now we have basically two parties. As we know, in any court, we have the plaintiff and the defendant. Now, the plaintiff is the farmer, the one who is growing his land, right? So imagine now he has some crops and he's ready maybe to harvest, right? So he's the plaintiff. Now, on the other hand, we have the defendant, and the defendant is a shepherd. So what happened? What did the shepherd do? What was his offense? Well, it says, إِذْ نَفَشَتْ فِيهِ غَنَمُ الْقَوْمِ. So imagine now we have a field, it says, we have a field, and what happened, these, sheep, the sheep that the shepherd owned, they spread in that field. Maybe the shepherd was not paying attention, and then the sheep spread out in that field, and they started eating, from that field. They ate the field, they ate the plants in the field. And essentially, they destroyed the crop. That's what they did. All right. So we have now a flock of sheep, or whatever you say, a herd of sheep, and they spread out. Okay. They spread out and they ate the entire, crop. So that is the situation here. That is a lawsuit. So it says, إِذْ نَفَشَتْ فِيهِ غَنَمُ الْقَوْمِ. So imagine now a huge herd of sheep, and they spread out throughout the field and they ate all the crops. وَكُنَّا لِحُكْمِهِمْ شَاهِدِينَ. And we were a witness. Now this is God speaking, right? And it says that we witnessed, this is the royalty, we for royalty here. And we witnessed what happened. Like we witnessed, what happened to the farmer and the shepherd. Okay. So now, obviously, these two people, they're disputing. I could imagine the farmer saying, hey, your animals, your sheep came and ate my crops, and this is my only source of sustenance. You have to pay me, you have to compensate for my loss. And I could imagine the shepherd saying, hey, sorry, I did not pay attention. It was not my intention to do that. So maybe intentionality comes in and all of that. So they go both to Dawud alayhi salam. All right. And Dawud was known for his judgment. So he was a judge. That's why they approached Dawud alayhi salam. And of course, you can read about the story in different places in the Quran. There's another version of the story in Surat Sad. And it says that Dawud was in his temple, or like a place of worship. He was worshiping, and they almost ambushed him. He was taken by surprise. They showed up all of a sudden. He was startled because they showed up by surprise. These are some details you can read about in other verses. But here, we want to focus on the story itself. And that's what the scholars of tafsir, the commentators on the Quran mentioned what happened. So basically they said these two people came upon Dawud and presented the case in front of him. So Dawud gave a quick judgment. He rushed into judging, and that's never good when you are a judge. Now, there could have been different reasons. We don't know the exact reason. We all humans, right? And every day is different. Some days they're very stressful on us, and something could cloud our judgment. In other days, we are in a much better condition to judge. All right. So essentially, Dawud alayhi salam, he said, well, obviously you inflicted, talking to the shepherd, the defendant, he said, obviously you inflicted damage on this man's livelihood, property, right? And your flock ate all the crops. So this man's livelihood is gone for the whole year. And you can remember, I mean, you only harvest once a year, right? So now this man's livelihood for the entire year was gone. So in Dawud's mind, the compensation, the appropriate compensation would be that you give all your sheep, the whole entire herd, you give it to the farmer, and that's it. And in a way, it is kind of harsh. It's a harsh judgment to tell this man to lose your sustenance as well, because the shepherd, right, that is his whole sustenance. He relies on the sheep. And now he's lost it forever. Okay. So on their way out of that, whatever, courtroom, let's say, Sulaiman was actually, and that's something I want you all, especially the young ones, to listen carefully. So Sulaiman alayhi salam was very attentive, all right? And he was listening. He was not, I mean, he could have said, I'm too young, I'm 11 years old, right? I'm gonna go play in the field. Why should I mess with adult stuff, right? These are grown-up things that the grown-up do, right? Why should I even bother? But Sulaiman was not like that. Sulaiman was very attentive. He was very interested in his father's job. His father was a judge, and he was listening. He was interested to see what kind of verdict would my father give. And I would imagine that he was listening not just for this particular verdict, but I'm sure he was listening in, and he was attentive to other situations like that. All right. So he stopped. These people were walking out. Right. They were walking out of the courtroom, and Sulaiman stops them. And this is important, he asked them, what was your case? What was the verdict? Now, Sulaiman listened to it already, but it's always good to listen to the parties directly, just to make sure you did not misunderstand anything. So indeed, the two parties, like the shepherd and the farmer, told Sulaiman the story. And then they told him the verdict. So Sulaiman says, I think I have a better proposal that is going to be gentler to you, more gentle, because gentleness and being careful, right? Meaning you don't pass a rash judgment, you don't rush into conclusions, and you're careful not to hurt anyone in the situation. Because sometimes in the heat of the moment, and because we kind of see an oppression, we might overreact. And in order to compensate, and in order to accomplish justice, and this is really important for all the people involved in justice in general, like the social justice warriors, as we call them, it's a similar phenomena that if we see an injustice, we rush into correcting, and sometimes we overcorrect, just like what happened here. Dawud alayhi salam kind of overcorrected, right? But it's really important to see with the eyes of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Sulaiman caught it. He caught this overcorrection. And what happened, they said, okay, let's walk back to Dawud. Let the big judge hear your opinion, O Sulaiman. So now they all walk back to the court of Dawud alayhi salam. And look at the, it's also important to understand the attitude of the father. Because you might say, well, the father's honor now is under attack. His son is correcting him. I mean, again, let us think of, or in terms of the culture we live in or we come from sometimes. Like, who are you, the son, to object to your father or to even kind of, in a way, defy your father or to come with a different judgment that might show that your father was incorrect? But Dawud was not like that. He actually listened proudly to his son and the judgment that was super genius. And we're going to see what it was. The judgment of Sulaiman alayhi salam. So Sulaiman said, you, the shepherd, your animals definitely, destroyed the crops of the farmer. So what you have to do, you still give all your sheep to the farmer and let him benefit from it for the entire year, because you destroyed his crop for the entire year. Like, this farmer cannot do anything. He doesn't have any other source of income for the entire year. All right? So now the farmer has been compensated for that year, because we know there's nothing we can do about this year now. The crops are gone. You cannot bring them back. So the way to compensate that is to give the farmer that, herd of sheep for the entire year, and the farmer can benefit that way. He could have a source of income for that year. And he said, meanwhile, you give the field to the shepherd, so he can, he can plow it again and, put the seeds in the ground and watch, take care of the field for that entire year. And next year, you should have a brand new crop, right? You should have a harvest next year. So now you give it back, next year, the shepherd will give back the land to the farmer, and the farmer will give the sheep back to the shepherd. Brilliant idea. And that way you've taken care of the farmer will earn his livelihood for this year from the sheep, and for the next year, he's back on track because he has a new harvest. And the shepherd did not lose his herd forever. He only lost it for a year, and that's a price he has to pay for his negligence, right? So there's always some price you pay. So now the shepherd only pays for 1 year. He only loses his source of income for 1 year, right? And next year, he gets his entire herd back, and he's back on track as well. So next year, everybody is back on track, no losses. This year, we have to compensate and we have to do some corrections here and there. Brilliant idea. And Dawud was impressed with that judgment. In fact, the Quran says, and that's really the important part, it says, فَفَهَّمْنَاهَا سُلَيْمَانَ. Fahama is to give the understanding, the deep and the correct understanding from fahm. Fahm is understanding. So it says, we gave the understanding to Sulaiman. So a lot of judgments, a lot of verdicts could be okay in some cases, right? And they may not be totally unjust, but there's a difference between that judgment and a brilliant judgment. It's almost like there's a divine intervention here. But also the fact that Sulaiman was gifted. So it doesn't have to be, nowadays we always think of miracles, right? When it comes to religion. Here it also could mean that we have gifted Sulaiman. And that's a divine gift, right? If you are gifted with a particular talent, right? And you develop it into a skill. That's also from Allah, from God, right? So Allah gave Sulaiman that gift, the ability to see through things and to be able to be just in difficult situations like that. And to make sure that everybody is righted. No one is wronged in this case. And again, there's no such a thing as a perfect judgment. You could still say, well, maybe the shepherd lost for 1 year, right? He did not have a source of income. We don't know. We don't know all the details, how he was, living in that year. But you could see through the judgment of Sulaiman, a lot of justice happening. And at least for the long term, it's a perfect justice. But then the Quran also very fair. The Quran says both are good. So it says, وَكُلًّا آتَيْنَا حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا. And to both we have given judgment, like a good instinct in judgment, right? And we gave knowledge. All right. So that's the end of the story. And that's all I wanted to mention today, inshallah. I hope it was insightful. One thing I want to mention also, some scholars mentioned that, Allah knows best, but they say that this idea of appealing a verdict may have its roots here in this story, because obviously you could say that Dawud could have said, this is my final judgment, my final verdict, and it cannot be changed, it cannot be modified. But we see this process where Dawud saw a better solution and he was willing to like modify or ratify his decision. So this is actually a case where a story where we see that the possibility of a decision being turned or being changed or modified. And that goes way back in our history. The fact that no judgment has to be final. If we're able, for example, nowadays, we obviously there are different reasons for appeal, and this is exactly where I need Brother Saad. But obviously, if new evidence comes to surface, right, that's one reason you may want to reconsider, right? And nowadays, obviously, we have different levels of courts, and you can appeal in a higher court and all of that. But the idea is there in the history, and it's in the Quran also. The fact that no judgment should be, final, especially when we're able to come up with a better solution or more evidence or something, maybe a new witness or something like that. All right. So I want to stop here, inshallah. We have 10 minutes or so for questions or comments. So let's give you some time, inshallah, to do that. But I do have to stop by, I think, what do we say, 8:40, right? So 10 minutes, inshallah. So we're not gonna, this time we're not gonna call back, right? Because usually we call back after we lose the session. Hopefully this time we don't have to do that. So the floor is yours. If you want to ask questions, either you could put it in the chat or the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and you can speak, inshallah. Any questions? And I think meanwhile, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the broadcast on Facebook. Okay. Okay. Any questions? I see a hand. Sorry, I apologize. All right, go ahead. I think now you can unmute, Brother Saad.
Assalamu alaikum. All right, so a couple of questions then. So in the story of Sulaiman and Dawud, one of the key references was that he wanted to appeal the decision, right? Now, whenever I've listened to the story, I think that it's not a matter of he gave a too harsh of a decision. And I think you even referenced it earlier that it was a correct decision in that sense, but it was an incomplete decision in the case of Dawud alayhi salam, because he said, okay, you have to give your flock to the other party, but he never gave an entirely balanced. He didn't give a balanced approach to the future in terms of making a decision. So I guess my question is, how far along do we have to look at in the context of making the decision? Like, do we need to look at it in terms of the immediate necessity of the solution, or do we look at it in terms of, okay, within that time frame that this person has lost, that's how much we have to compensate the other party that's lost their flock in this case. So I guess that's my question. Like, what's that time frame that we're looking at?
Yeah, a very good question. I think we have to look at the impact here, right? So for example, if the decision has a long-term impact, so if the repercussions are long-term, like in this case, for example, think about the livelihood of the shepherd. So now he's lost his livelihood forever, right? So obviously he's impacted not for this year only, he's impacted forever. So I think if that decision has a long-term effect, then yes, in those cases, definitely we have to consider, at least we have to consider the long term. In other cases, if it was a short-term thing, for example, if let's say Dawud said, you go ahead and give him a few sheep, like maybe 5 sheep, right? You can argue maybe those 5 sheep are equivalent to 1 year of crops, right? And it's a loss to the shepherd, but well deserved, right? He was, I mean, he's the faulty party, right? He's the one who is negligent. So he did incur a loss for that year because he lost, 5 sheep. But in the long term, he still had his flock. Now, obviously, Sulaiman's decision is far better than the one I just proposed, right? It's a brilliant one. But I'm just saying, I'm just giving you a counter example where maybe a case, or I'm sorry, the verdict of a case could have a short-term impact, but not a long-term one. It seems like in the case of Dawood, the impact was long-term, and that's why it had to be corrected. God knows this.
Right. And then I have one more question. So currently in our society, we have judges that are both male and female. And throughout Islam, we've always been taught, okay, no, for in terms of judges, it should be a male, it should be men, because why? Because of certain reasons why. And so, I just want to reconcile this in terms of our current society and basically what we have to deal with in terms of moving forward, in terms of in the legal field, especially. How applicable is this like concept of the female judge in today's society, and then how applicable is it in terms of what we can use to learn from in terms of Islamic history? Because Islamic history shows us the opposite of a lot of things that we are often told. Example, women cannot be leaders, but then we look at the Queen of Sheba and look at how she ruled. Women cannot do X, Y, and Z, but then we look at how certain members of the Prophet's family who were women did such and such. So, or even people in Medina who represented the women in that society, how they went about it. So I just want to just get in the context of judges, how does that really apply now in today's society?
I like how you almost said hadith and then you kind of stopped.
Yeah, it was, I misspoke there. That was my bad.
No, you did not misspeak, because I'm going to bring that hadith that everybody uses as supposedly evidence that women cannot be, let's say, judges. The hadith actually is it was not even directed to Muslims. It was not necessarily like an edict or like an instruction to Muslims not to have female leaders, female judges, female rulers, governors, etc. Rather, the Prophet once heard, alayhi salatu salam, that the Persians have elected or have chosen a female leader. And obviously that was a case where she was ruling the entire land of Persia. So he made a comment, he made a remark, and he said, لن يفلح قوم ولوا أمرهم امرأة. A people, so, and every word also matters. As I always say, words matter. He said, a people will not succeed. He didn't even say haram or halal, by the way. He didn't say it's forbidden or not forbidden. He said, a people will not succeed if they choose a woman to be on top. وَلَّوْ أَمْرَهُمْ, like they give her the entire, she's in charge of everything. Now, obviously, if you say that in today's environment and you're going to be called many different names, labels, whatever, right? But I don't think we should ever shy away or hide anything. I mean, this is obviously in many books, and many non-Muslims are reading those things already. So it's not, sometimes I see Muslims trying to hide that, and it's really silly doing that, because like I said, non-Muslims are reading Bukhari and Muslim more than you and I. But what I want to mention here is a few things. One, again, the Prophet ﷺ did not say halal